Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse and the theme and the motif of Matthew chapter 25 and verse 14. Jesus told the parable of a nobleman who was getting ready to go on a long journey. And he called his servants to himself. He gave talents to them, and he said, "You take care of this until I come." And after a long time, he returned, and he gathered his servants before him, and he judged them according to how they had employed the talents, the funds, if you please, that he had given to them. Now, we are told by the majority of commentaries that this passage is really really proof positive that the coming of the Lord would not be for an awful long time, i.e. 2,000 years so far. Well, here's what's so amazing about that argument. And I'm getting ready to get back to Isaiah 2 through 4. But isn't it amazing that the very people who tell us, well, you know, God doesn't tell time like we do. God doesn't think about time like we do. So therefore, when the New Testament writer said the coming of the Lord was at hand, it was coming soon, shortly, quickly, etc., etc. Even when it says, and now in a very, very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not tarry. Look, those don't mean anything. Because after all, God doesn't think like we do. One day is with the Lord 1,000 years as a day. But then guess what they do? They turn right around and they go to Matthew 25:14. Kenneth Gentry does this. And they say, well, it says a long time. And a long time is a long time. And it's obviously 2,000 years. Now, to be honest here, and to be fair, Kenneth Gentry doesn't go to the time statements of imminence in the New Testament and seek to negate them. Kenneth Gentry admits that those time statements of imminence applied to the coming of the Lord in AD 70. So he's consistent there, but then he seems to think, matter of fact, it's necessary for his view, that a long time in Matthew 25:14 and following must refer to 2,000 years. Why can it not refer to the very generation that Jesus was speaking about? I mean, after all, if you're talking about this span of time of generation, then down toward the end of that generation is a long time. I can tell you right now, 40 years to me is a long time. So anyway, I just find that really, really ironic, interesting, and obviously inconsistent. Now, as I promised you yesterday, I want to go back because, you see, we're talking about this return of the absent master motif. And I've been sharing with you how the Old Testament presents the story of the absence of Yahweh. Over and over and over, the absence of Yahweh. But the promise, return to me, and I will return to you. The promise and the fact, I will depart and go back to my place until they repent. Hosea chapter 5, verse 15. Chapter 6, he will return to us. He will come to us. He will raise us up. They'll be dead. And we will live in his presence. In the Septuagint, that word presence is from prosopon, meaning face. It's very, very akin to parousia. So here we have in the Old Testament this concept of the absence of the Lord. And Jesus that came declaring that return was going to take place shortly. Now, I shared with you last Thursday and yesterday as well the fact that Isaiah chapters 2 through 4 is a united discourse, and it talks about, listen to me, it talks about the last days, day of the Lord. The last days, day of the Lord, when the Lord would arise to shake the earth mightily. Isaiah chapter 2, 19 through 21. Now, it'll be tomorrow before we really connect all the dots that I'm going to share with you here. But I want to tell you, when we look, getting ahead of myself here, when we look at Isaiah 2, 19 to 21. When we go to the ministry of Jesus, Luke 23, when we go to the Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, and when we go to the book of Revelation, guess what we have? We have a consistent, united application of Isaiah 2 through 4 and applied very specifically to AD 70. To me, it is one of the most beautiful and one of the most powerful examples of correctly connecting the dots that we can find. But I am seeking at this time, I want to build on what I shared with you yesterday from Isaiah chapter 2 and 3. But I want to go into chapter 4 now and establish the context, the framework, and the time for the fulfillment of this last days, day of the Lord, when the Lord would arise to shake the earth mightily. I shared with you last Thursday and yesterday, this would be the last days, day of the Lord, when men could run to the mountains, hide in the caves, cry to the rocks, fall on us. That cannot be describing an earth-burning, time-ending event that is over in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. There's something wrong, yeah, it's biblically wrong, with the view that the term the last days refers to the Christian age, and this day of the Lord of this last days refers to the end of time that is over in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. Because these two ideas don't work, okay? This concept of an earth-burning, time-ending event that's over in the blink of an eye, and the biblical description of the last days, day of the Lord, when men could run to the hills, hide in the caves, cry to the rocks, fall on us. I'm sorry, those two ideas do not mesh. Just doesn't work. Okay. This last days, day of the Lord, would be a time of famine. Isaiah 3, 1 to 3, when the Lord would take away from Jerusalem the stock of bread and the flow of water. It would be a time in which Yahweh, pardon me, it would be the time in which the Lord would stand up to judge His people. And the Lord stands to judge the people. The Lord will enter into judgment with the elders of His people and His princes. For you have eaten up my vineyard. Now, I should have taken note of this yesterday, but this judgment of Jerusalem is the time of the judgment of the leaders. Why? Because he says, you, the leaders of Jerusalem, have eaten up my vineyard. Well, what's the vineyard? According to Isaiah chapter 5, please connect the dots. According to Isaiah chapter 5, Israel herself was the vineyard. Just go read it. I don't have time this morning to go there and develop that, but it's absolutely undeniable. So here in Isaiah chapter 3, we have a prediction of the last days, day of the Lord, judgment of the leaders of Israel because of their perversion of their power over Israel. You know, I'm reminded of Matthew chapter 21, verse 33 and following, and the story of the wicked husbandman given charge over what? Oh, you know, the vineyard. And those men, and this segues perfectly into Isaiah chapter 4, as we will see momentarily. When the time of the harvest came, the Lord sent forth His servants to gather the harvest. Those wicked servants, or those wicked husbandmen, killed, persecuted those servants of the master. The master said, well, I'll send my son. Surely they will reverence him. Instead, they said, when the son came, look, this is the son. Let us kill him and take the inheritance. And the Lord challenged, you know, he's surrounded at this time by the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes. And this is really quite funny. It's so rich. So he's surrounded by them. And he turns to that hostile audience and he says, what will the master of that vineyard do, notice, when he comes? And he uses a form of the Greek word erchomai, uses the word elthi. And those Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes say, he will utterly destroy those wicked husbandmen. And Jesus says, well, yeah. Have you never read that the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone? And it's going to crush and destroy all of those who reject it? And those Pharisees understood that he spoke of them. And Jesus said, the kingdom shall be taken from you and given to another nation that will bring forth the fruits. Now, the Lord would come. Is that the day of the Lord? Is that the last day of the Lord of Isaiah? Well, let's go to Isaiah chapter 4 to see how this segues and harmonizes so beautifully. In this last day's day of the Lord, verse 2, in that day the branch of the Lord shall be glorious. It's the coming of the Lord. Verse 3, it shall come to pass that the one who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy. Everyone who is recorded among the living in Jerusalem. By the way, that is a reference to Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, when the books were opened at the time of the judgment during the feast days. I can't develop that. When, do you see that? When the Lord has washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and, watch this, and purged the blood of Jerusalem from her midst by the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning. Wait a minute. So we have a last days, day of the Lord, the coming of the branch, the time of the salvation of the remnant at the time of the festivals of Israel. Because again, it was during Rosh Hashanah and specifically Yom Kippur in which the Jews said and believed and taught the books of God were opened. You have the book of the living, you have the book of the dead, the condemned. And you have an intermediate book that's not yet determined. But they'll be given the opportunity to choose life and to be written in the book of life. And it would be, listen carefully, it would be when God would purge the filth from Jerusalem and remove the blood guilt of Jerusalem by the spirit of judgment and burning. Folks, this is the avenging of the blood of the martyrs. Here you have judgment on Israel for destroying the vineyard, perverting the vineyard. And you have Jesus' parable in Matthew 21, virtually echoing Isaiah 3 through 4. Talking about the rulers of Jerusalem and Israel perverting the vineyard, killing the prophets. They're guilty of the blood of the servants of God, just like those in Isaiah chapter 4. And you have Jesus talking about his coming to destroy those wicked husbandmen who had eaten up the vineyard. Oh, this is such incredible stuff. When did Jesus come and destroy the leaders of Jerusalem? When might that have been? When did Jesus say that the blood guilt of all of the righteous blood shed on the earth would be avenged? Do you suppose that all of that righteous blood from Abel onward would include the blood that Isaiah 4 is talking about? If not, why not? Would it include the righteous blood of those of Matthew 21? Well, if it includes those of Matthew chapter 21, it includes his servants that came before the sending of the Son of Man. So yeah, it includes those of Matthew chapter 23. And they would be avenged at his coming to utterly destroy those leaders. And those Pharisees that were living, breathing, standing right there, understood he spoke of them. Not some generation 2,000 years away. He spoke of them. And I'm out of time. So, hey, listen, don't forget, here we are approaching midway of October 2021. You don't want to forget my fantastic money-saving special of 3 books that will save you $20. Elijah Has Come, A Solution to Romans 11. 25 to 27, Seal Up Vision and Prophecy. And by the way, I'm almost out of these. I've got another edition coming. It's in the works, but I've only got, a few copies of this. So if you want your copy of this, you better order soon. And 70 weeks are determined for the resurrection. If you purchased each one of these separately and paid separate shipping, it would cost you $60. For the rest of the month of October 2021, U.S. orders only, total delivered price, $39.95. Fantastic money-saving offer. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Order the package. There's a banner right up at the very top. Save yourself $20. Okay, now, now that we've got a little bit of a handle on Isaiah 2 through 4, we're going to start connecting the dots on the flip side.